Grazie, Eric. Thank you very much for that, for this invitation, for creating the Cafe of Europe in the Republic of Europe in Santinumi. Thanks for our long friendship, for your dedication to Europe, for being Italian now as well as French in Europe. So, good evening, everybody. Buonasera. Is it okay to speak English? So I just say a few things, maximum 5 minutes. Who's got it? Stop me after 5 minutes. Then I ask Madeleina. Okay, so there's an extra glass of wine for a person who stops me in 5 minutes. Then I pass to Madeleina. You want Madeleina for as long as possible, I promise you. But I just want to explain why we're doing this evening, what our expectations were, and understand what your expectations are. And I hope you also will have questions, and we can answer questions, and we can have a conversation and a dialogue. If you think I'm going to mention the B word, I'm not going to mention the B word. No, I hope not.
So the B word is a B word.
Don't mention. My partner Maria, who's coming here later tonight, we were in California last summer, and my friend lent us his car. And you know those scenes in the movies when the police call you over and they come up to the car and you wind down the window. And I said to Maria, if this happens to us, what I'm going to say is, officer, please do not ask me about the B word. So I say the same thing to you, please do not ask me. But no, but seriously, what happened in 2016 in Britain was a traumatic event. And like any traumatic event, it changes you. It changes you. And I think there was a complete breakdown, a polarization, many across families, across communities, and it's taken Britain a long time, like any trauma, to heal, to recover strong. And you have to put the broken pieces together again. And the pieces are broken on the leave side and also on the remain side. And we'll have to wait and see what comes out of that process. But the very fact that the referendum happened at all, and especially the outcome and the way in which it was conducted, the public vote was conducted, and the outcome, which in retrospect has a little bit of inevitability about whether I believe it was all point to a serious breakdown in British political culture, actually, in my view. So it's going to take maybe whatever a generation is today, I don't know whether a generation is 5 years, 10 years, 20 years today, it's going to take a long time to recover, and so Britain is recovering. And when it has recovered, I think we will see a new kind of Britain. But I can tell you, Madeleine will tell you more, that there are still many people in Britain who believe in the European ideal, who want to rejoin the European Union, who love Europe. And so that gives us some hope. And what we were hoping this evening, as Mike said, is how many people in Rome want to come and show some sympathy and some empathy and some solidarity with some of those British people who care about Europe, want to rejoin Europe, who love Europe. And so here you are saying thank you very much, and we return the love. I think, and again, I'm probably already over my 5 minutes, so I just say this. I think part of the problem was that Britain always saw Europe as over there, as something else. You know, us and them. And so the whole idea was what we could get from Europe and how we could dominate. And it was always the question was, what is the relationship between Britain and Europe, the European Union? As if the European Union was always something different from what we were inside. And I've never heard anybody ask that question, anywhere else really. it's a meaningless question, because for every other EU member state, Europe is more like a family, it's like a community. Yes, it's a community of interest, like a family or any other community, we have interests, but it's also a community of values. It's a community of values that hold us together. And, you know, I still believe in those values, and I think Madeleina does too, and that's why we think of ourselves as Europeans. And I think many people in Ukraine, many people in Albania, and many people outside. So we think of a kind of European identity, not in terms of, okay, like Eric, I've got an Italian passport. But actually, I subscribe to these values. And perhaps we can think of European identity as not something that is to do with, you know, where you're born or what your passport is. Yeah. And I know that in Italy this is very important, where you're born. People always ask you, they say, where are you from? You say, when you say in Italy, where are they from? They will tell you the town that they're from. But by that they mean the town where they were born, you know, where they actually came to this world. So people say to me, where are you from? I say Grosseto, which is in Tuscany. They say, no, where are you from? Because you've got this accent. Oh, you mean, where was I born? Yeah, London. And then I say to them, where are you from? They say, Rome. I say, no, which hospital were you born in? But, you know, that isn't what the European identity should be about. Our European identity should be about our values, freedom. Well, the values of the French Revolution. Yeah? Solidarity, freedom, equality. And I think anybody who subscribes to those values should think of themselves as a European and should count as a European. And that's what I mean by new European. Somebody who identifies as a European because of the values rather than because of the passport or the territory. And so I am a new European, and I think it's a European. And I think that if one day, whenever it is, you know, and it sometimes happens, doesn't it, when relationships break down, it can be very traumatic. You know? And we've all been through this at some stage in our life, I'm sure. And then we rebuild our lives and we heal. And sometimes people get back together again, and sometimes they don't. Maybe that's what will happen in the future. I don't know. I can't see a pathway through to that. But I think we don't know the future. The future is open. I mean, when it does, it will be because many more people than Madeleina and I, and actually hundreds of thousands of other people in Britain too, can say we love Europe. They can say we're Europeans. They understand we're Europeans. The big tragedy of the big weather for me was that, you know, a lot of people said, well, British was not European. They didn't understand what European identity was, because we never talked about European identity. We just talked about what's in it for us and the economy. And we need to start doing that too now. And so really this evening is really come here in humility and say that we still identify, as I'm sure you do, with these values that are foundational for the European Union, but also very widely shared around the world, including by many people, so that Britain, so by people in Europe, and elsewhere. So thank you for the opportunity to come and share that with you. Thank you for your love and your solidarity. Keep believing. Maybe many of us in Britain miss the European Union. Maybe there are some people in the European Union who miss us in Britain. It's bad. Let's hope so. And one of the big reasons for having this family is that we would have Madeleina Kay once again as an EU citizen and not as she is at the moment, a European, passionate European, winner of the Young European of the Year award, but put outside of that so painfully and traumatically as a result of that word that we're not going to talk about, but it begins with B. So, over to you.
Sorry, just I would like to
something you can do. Thank you.
Very few words.
Thank you.
So I'll start by introducing myself. I am a British, English, don't really like calling myself English, but it's true, artist and activist. I no longer have EU citizenship. I only have British passport, and that's a bit of a tragedy for me because I feel like part of my identity is being taken from me. I consider myself European before British or English, but now that I've had my citizenship taken away, I feel a little bit lost, I guess. So I started campaigning in 2016, and it was really the referendum and specifically the kind of rhetoric, sloganeering and visual propaganda used by the Leave campaign that incensed me and motivated me to start my campaigning against Brexit, but more fundamentally what Brexit stands for, and to promote a positive European identity within the UK. I was at the time a student. I was studying landscape architecture. I was in my second year, and I actually dropped out to campaign full time. The story has a happy ending though, because I campaigned for 4 years using art as my communication method, and based on the portfolio of work that I produced during that time, they let me onto a master's degree in fine art at Central St Martin's, so I'm currently doing a master's degree. So I think I kind of observed how the lackluster effort of the Remain campaign, like David Cameron and George Osborne talking about the economy, was not inspiring to anybody. Yet the Leave campaign, you had Boris Johnson and his bus, you had Michael Gove and the Take Back Control slogans, and you had Nigel Farage and that horrendous poster on the side of an ad van demonising refugees coming over to this country. And I could see how they were manipulating people's emotions, and specifically fear-mongering, and using these propagandist tactics to touch people's hearts to get them to vote for Leave. And I could see how they were doing that, and it was awful to watch, but I could also see how the Remain campaign were not doing that. And for me, there was a gap in the market. You know, there was something needed to be done to bring that level of emotion, that creativity, because they were using creative methods with their propaganda, to mobilise the pro-EU sentiment, and to fight them on their own playing field. Because if they're playing football and they're appealing to a mass populist audience, there's no point us going off and playing cricket because we think it's more sophisticated. We have to play them at their own game. So I decided that I was going to use the creative tools that I had at my disposal to start campaigning to promote European identity and European values and a positive idea of the EU within the UK. Now I play guitar and I write songs, and Eric's daughters kindly lent me her guitar so I can do some songs later. So I started writing protest songs about Brexit, about Europe and European values. I also am a visual artist, so one of the first things that I did in 2016 in response to the spike in hate crime against refugees and migrants that we saw after Nigel Farage's Breaking Point poster and campaign of intimidation and harassment and vilifying these individuals who are the most vulnerable members of our society. I decided that I wanted to try and combat that narrative, but taking an educational approach. I wrote a children's picture book about refugees that was telling the story through animal characters. And I crowdfunded this. We printed, I think it was 1,000 copies that were distributed to schools. I did book readings in schools, and we also sold the book in aid of my local refugee charity in Sheffield, which is called the City of Sanctuary. And Sheffield is very proud to be the first city of sanctuary in the UK and to have a very positive and welcoming attitude to refugees. So it was a small contribution to this effort of my city to welcome refugees. So I started getting involved with a lot of grassroots groups across the UK. There was an explosion of pro-European sentiment amongst the grassroots movements who wanted to take a stand against Brexit, and I would work with them, I would go to their events, I would sing and perform my songs, and I discovered that if I turned up wearing a costume, it would get a lot more attention. And then I ended up wearing a lot of different costumes, but the one that really stuck and became my identity was the EU Supergirl costume. And I think maybe because this had a very positive message, it was something that everybody could relate to and identify with the narrative around a superhero, needing a superhero to save the UK. But one of the reasons why it became my hashtag was because I attended a press conference in Brussels. I had won a competition called EU in My Region blogging competition, and the prize was to go to Brussels for a week with an independent journalist pass, and I managed to get into this press conference with this pass. But before going in, I put on my Supergirl costume, and the press conference could not start because instead of focusing on the negotiators, David Davis and Michel Barnier, all of the cameras were on me. And in the end, the EU threw me out of the press conference. Even though I had the right to be there and I had the pass and everything, they threw me out. And then the headline on the TV, it was on BBC and ITV and Sky and The Guardian and everywhere. And the headline was, the UK needs a superhero to save it from Brexit. Unfortunately, the EU threw her out of the press conference.
It's all true.
Let's translate that. So I gained a bit of a reputation as a troublemaker, and I was very good at getting press coverage for the anti-Brexit campaign. I think partly because I was one of very, very few young people that was part of the movement, and in the same way that the press latched onto Greta Thunberg as like an icon of the environmental movement, they kind of had the same approach with me of this is the person that's going to tell the story of the young people that are against Brexit. The problem was that a lot of the campaigns that were against Brexit in the UK did not like me, and they did not like my pro-EU narrative. And it may sound completely insane, but these organisations thought that they could stop Brexit without talking about the EU and why the EU was good. Instead, they focused on why Brexit was bad. And if I'm honest, it didn't reach people, and they put all of their effort into getting a second vote, which they called a people's vote, instead of putting any effort into changing people's minds. And I always thought that that was a really stupid approach, because if you ask for another vote and you haven't put any effort into changing people's minds or their perception of the EU, then you're going to get the same answer. And also, if you don't get that vote, you've lost all of that effort and that time and that resources which could have gone into changing public sentiment and understanding of the European Union, which to me was the fundamental problem. So I found myself being drawn more to European organisations, and part of that came through winning the Young European of the Year award in 2018, which is awarded by the Schwarzkopf Foundation, which is based in in Berlin, and every year they pick one activist, young activist, who's been promoting European values to win this award. And after that, I started getting more invitations to work with organisations that were based in Europe, like Pulse of Europe, to perform at their events. And I also got a grant from a Democracy Needs Imagination grant from the European Cultural Foundation to do a tour of the EU in 2019. And honestly, that came at a really good time for me, because as Roger was just commenting, the division within the Remain campaign and the toxicity at the beginning, sort of end of 2018, beginning of 2019, was horrendous, and it was, particularly for a young woman, a horrible place to be. And I wasn't just getting trolled on a daily basis by the Leave campaign and all of the bots which had been sponsored by Russia, but also by other Remainers. And they used very misogynistic slurs against me. They would say things like, she's a prima donna, she's a little madam, she's a spoilt brat, she's an attention seeker. And this was coming from other Remainers who didn't agree with my approach, this highly visual, highly emotional campaign that I was executing. So I did this tour of the EU, and I was filming interviews with activists from across the EU member states to explore how people in different countries were standing up for European values. But I was also making sketches, watercolour ink drawings of every country, with the aim of bringing them together in a collective artwork that would debunk one of the main narratives of the Leave campaign, which was that the EU creates a cultural monolith that erodes the national identity and cultures of the member states. So I was trying to take a more artistic approach and a more pan-European approach to the campaigning, because I felt at a bit of a loss in the UK and within the kind of pro and anti-Brexit movements. Yeah, so and it's something I continue to do to this day, so I'm always carrying these with me, so if you want to take a look at the drawings. And yeah, so I made a book and a documentary from this project, from this tour of the EU, and this book and this documentary won the Charlemagne Youth Prize. If you've not heard of the Charlemagne Youth Prize, this is awarded jointly by the European Parliament and the Karls Prize Foundation, which is based in Aachen. And they award it to projects from young Europeans who are promoting international understanding. So I'm now part of the alumni network of this prize, and we received funding from the Parliament to do a voter mobilisation campaign for the EU elections. So I'm travelling a lot at the moment, and you'll probably see that from the sketchbooks, but I'm travelling a lot to different events within the EU to mobilise young people to vote in the upcoming elections. And it's been really important for me to be part of this community where I feel like I belong, because often in the UK I'm struggling to, I was born in Leicester, I don't particularly like my hometown. I now live in Sheffield, which I love, but I also don't have roots there in a way, and I often feel like I struggle to think where I actually belong. But when I'm going to these events and I'm with this community of young Europeans from across the EU, I feel like I belong with them, and that feels like my identity. And many of them are also not from EU member states. One of my dear friends is from Albania, another from Ukraine, and I think that the EU needs to take maybe a broader attitude to European identity, because there are many people in the UK, but also in other, accession member states that want to be part of the EU and to promote that European identity and the values that the EU stands for. So I guess the last thing that I'd say is that I feel like what I've learned from Brexit is that you often don't know what you've got until it's taken away from you. And there's this level of complacency with people that have privilege and that have rights, that they don't appreciate them, and they don't realise what they've got until it's taken away. So this is why I'm always keen to fellow Europeans who have EU citizenship to really appreciate those rights and those privileges and to stand up for European democracy, because there is a threat of the far right across EU member states, and to kind of brush them off and think, oh well, they're never really going to substantiate themselves. Just look at what happened in the UK. They won, and we had our rights, and I've had my European identity and my citizenship taken away from me. So just please don't be complacent and please vote in elections.
How much time have we got for singing, drinking and dancing?
Yeah.
Right, look. That's also what Europe is about. Yeah, over to you. Yeah, Madeleina, please.
Thank you very much, Madeleina. I hope that you will come back very soon also to Rome. Hope that we'll have more time. But now we are really curious to hear you singing and thinking for our common identity, European identity.
Do you want to sing with me? Like this. And if you can't, it's repetitive, so it's easy to pick up. But if you can't, then you can also just well.
Sometimes you feel